Dialogues featuring Ankr. So, Rollup Dialogues is a new series that we've launched where we invite Rollup as a service providers, also known as RaaS providers, to share with us information about their product, how they see the RaaS sector evolving, and how they are distinguishing themselves within this sector. RaaS has become an extremely interesting topic and popular sector in the cryptocurrency landscape. We see that there are a multitude of RaaS providers building captivating products with really the potential to have strong influence and change the way that we both build and engage and interact with chains and decentralized applications. And so at DIA, this has become a great focus for us as we navigate the growing RaaS space and look to provide DIA oracles as the go-to-market option for rollups. And at that, we're honored to be joined here today by Kev Silk, who is the Senior Product Manager at Ankr, as well as Paul Claudius, who's the co-founder and head of BD at DIA. And we will open a dialogue about the direction that the RaaS industry is heading and really how both teams will play a substantial role within this sector. So at that, I'd like to say hello, Kev and Paul. Welcome to the stage. Kev, maybe we'll start with you. Can you hear me well? And how's everything going today?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be the first guest of the Roll-Up Dialogue with Dia. As mentioned, I'm a senior product manager at Ankr. I lead our Rollups as a service product. But Ankr, we're a decentralized physical infrastructure blockchain company is how I like to view us. Ultimately, a developer hub of tools to help developers build high quality applications to allow consumers utilize incredible decentralized applications. So thrilled to be here.
It's great. We're really thrilled to have you as the first, I guess, partner on this series, Kevin, and really excited to dive into this today. Yeah, we've also had you on previous sessions within the scope of other topics, and so it's great to revisit this one today with a new topic at hand. Other than that, Paul, how about you on your end? Can you hear me well? And how's everything going?
Perfect, Dylan. Yeah, all good. Thanks everyone for joining in and Kev for joining us on this first of hopefully many interesting discussions with the broader Rollup ecosystem. And Dylan, really excited you're modding this today, and looking forward to dive into everything around RaaS and how these different infrastructure components, the services provided, will play out in the next months and years to come.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you, Paul. I think it's a really exciting time to really start jump-starting these spaces and diving into the details as we all, really navigate what are the next steps here and how can we all continue to improve the role that we play within it. We do always like to start with just a brief background on who we're hearing from. Kev, if you don't mind, can we start with you? Just a little bit about how long ago you joined Ankr as senior product manager and maybe how long you've been working in the crypto space.
Sure, yeah. So I joined Ankr around 3 years ago. Prior to being here, I was with Gartner, a research company. I started learning about blockchain technology there, but the thing is that being at Gartner, most of the work that I was doing was just learning about different types of layer one blockchains. This was around 2018, 2019. And as great as it was learning and writing about these incredible projects that were transforming the way that we utilize the internet, I wanted to actually be a part of it. I wanted to build, I wanted to be a part of these communities. But Ankr is what stood out to me the most because rather than, build an L1 or build a dApp, I wanted to be at the forefront of all the different chains, of all the different dApps. And rather than, dig for gold, I wanted to supply the shovels. That way I could get near to the ground for what all these amazing projects we're doing, which is why I chose Ankr, because obviously we're a blockchain infrastructure company. We have connections to over 46 different chains. So that's what allowed me to truly learn. Like it's one thing to learn from reading and listening, but it's another thing to, truly be involved with it. So around 2020, late 2020, early 2021, time is flying. I joined Ankr and it's been an incredible experience ever since.
Yeah, and I want to stick with you here, Kev, because one of the things you've actually already mentioned is that Ankr does more than just provide roll up as a service a roll-up as a service framework. Really, it's quite interesting to like look into all the different products and services that Ankr has offered, and really how it's evolved over the years. Can you share us a little bit of background on, precisely this? How has the Ankr product and service suite evolved over the years, and how did you guys find yourselves, well positioned to now get into the RaaS side of things?
Yeah, good question. So I guess starting on just a little bit more about Ankr. So we launched in 2017. Obviously, our token, ANKR, the same as our name, also launched in 2017. And I would say our bread and butter is infrastructure. But it's more than just rollups as a service, right? Like we offer standalone RPCs and other developer tools like privacy authenticator tools, advanced APIs, SDKs, things of that nature. We also have a whole other side of the business for liquid staking, right? So along with infrastructure, we have our liquid staking product. We were actually, ironically enough, we were the first ETH liquid staking company before Lido, actually, back in 2020. And now we service liquid staking for a few different POS chains like Avalanche, Phantom, obviously Ethereum. So yeah, I mean, I like to consider us like a developer hub of tools, and what we care most about is giving builders the infrastructure that they need to reach their full potential, and that's what's so important, right? Like it doesn't matter whether you're building a decentralized application or something in the physical world, like a plane or a bridge. Like builders only reach their full potential if the infrastructure allows them to do so, and that's what Ankr does. We were this term DePIN is starting to gain a whole lot of traction. It's a massive buzzword, but Ankr's been sort of an OG DePIN provider since 2017 because we have nodes all over the world. I think it's over 20 different countries. And we have incredible partners within our network as well. And we also utilize bare metal servers. And that's very important because it provides a sustainable, secure environment for developers to build. So I guess what made sense for us to move into the RaaS space is because we have that high quality infrastructure product that is able to service this trend that we saw in, say, I don't know, maybe late 2022 or early 2023 for rollups. And that's ultimately what led us into this path, which I can dive deeper into, but might be a more of a long-winded answer.
No, I absolutely appreciate that, and I can relate on the same side from the DIA perspective as an infrastructure provider. It's a pretty great space to be in because there's a lot of opportunistic routes you can take with the product. As the space evolves so fast, infrastructure providers are like uniquely well positioned to capture different opportunities in different ways that the space is evolving. So I think that's a really interesting point in how you guys have had this infrastructure set up and how that's allowed you to be well positioned for both liquid staking opportunity and now RaaS opportunity. But before we do dive any further into the depths of this topic, I want to take it back to a high level here for anybody in the audience who's actually just not familiar with RaaS at all. Maybe this is the first time they're even hearing the term or hearing rollup as a service. Because I myself have left this definition ambiguous so far because I wanted to allow for you, Kev, to give us a bit of an explanation from your side of things. Can you share with us really what does this mean? What are rollups as a service, otherwise known as RaaS? And when did this even start becoming a prominent topic or theme within the cryptocurrency space?
Sure. I think, before diving into what RaaS is and who RaaS providers are, it's like, let's take it even further and say, like, what's a rollup, right? I think it's first to, solidify that. Ultimately, rollups, well, even let's first take a look at L1s, right? L1 chains, as we know, they have some limitations in terms of scalability, right? Like they can only handle a certain number of transactions per second. It slows down the transaction time, which hinders the building experience, which obviously hinders the user experience. So, of course, what do? We start building a lot of layer 2 scaling solutions like side chains and state channels, and then rollups. So rollups is a layer 2 scaling solution, and it solves for that scalability challenge because it brings in another layer that operates alongside the main chain, and that other layer is a rollup, and that rollup processes transactions off of the main chain. So basically, it takes a lot of the stress off of the beacon chain, mainly Ethereum, as we all know. It processes transactions on that other layer and then sends through batch transactions up to the main chain so that everything is still clear. So they still inherit the security of the main chain as well, which is very, very important. And then I would say there's two most popular rollups right now: optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. Um, but where rollups as a service comes into play are the infrastructure providers that are servicing the development of those architectures, of those rollups for developers to be able to build. So rollup providers like Ankr, we streamline the overall deploying and managing of rollups on any type of architecture, right? Whether it's Polygon, whether it's Arbitrum, whether it's ZK Sync, whoever it may be. And then within that, these RaaS providers, they provide some, I mean, you could consider it like pre-built infrastructure, right? Like RPCs, block explorers, provers, sequencers, and all of that eliminates the need for the developer to have to build it themselves, right? So rather than build their own blockchain or build the infrastructure to support their rollup, they utilize a rollup as a service provider to do that for them so that they can focus on building their application, building their service, and focus on the user experience to capture more demand for their project rather than supporting the overall infrastructure. So I would say from a high level, that's where all of this comes into play.
Absolutely. I think that's a really comprehensive and great background for us to dive deeper into. Starting at how rollups are, derived from the need for scaling solutions, going into, how they process and batch transactions and back on the main beacon chain and inherit the underlying security of the chain. And I'm just reiterating, some of these points here that I found fascinating. And provide the opportunities for devs to build rollups without having to build out entirely new, I guess, infra around it, right? Nodes,
Yeah.
RPCs, oracles. And at that, I'd love to bring Paul onto this question here and hear from Paul's perspective. When did you, Paul, see rollups as a service or, rollups becoming prominent from your perspective and start noticing that this sector might be an interesting opportunity for DIA as an Oracle provider?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. That's a great question, and like to pick up your analogy, Kev. You were bringing on infrastructure providers taking care of bringing rigs and shuttles to the place. I think that's kind of our pleasure to be the ones to equip builders with the tooling they currently need to in the best possible and easiest way build the products they have fetched out, and that's also kind of our, I guess, starting point when we built DIA in 2018, with the high conviction back then that we'll end up in a space where there are lots of ecosystems semi-perfectly connected and living somehow in harmony, and there's going to be infrastructure needed which takes into consideration that these ecosystems are all present and need to communicate with each other, but don't do so in like a perfect way. So that really influence our architecture. So we differentiate between assets on different chains and the stakes of these different chains when it comes to our Oracle infrastructure. So I think like already back then, I wouldn't say that we anticipated this tremendous growth and roll-ups, L2s, L3s, and the increasing fragmentation within the space. But luckily, our infrastructure was kind of like catering to that use case from day one. So now moving into where we are today, seeing rollups as like a fundamental building component for a lot of people building applications and wanting to customize certain things and taking off the heavy load of transaction to a more economic environment. I believe we are kind of perfectly equipped, and I'm quite excited in this very new and emerging space to see like how can we best provide again rigs and shuttles for builders here. So is the complete modularization, which is possible, and we see as a theme across infrastructure, right? Everybody's focusing very much on some specific component and trying to optimize here. Or are these builders best served with a pre-configured stack of different infrastructure components to like deploy fast, test things? And I think I personally, I'm curious on your perspective here, Kev and Dylan. I think there's like not one answer to it, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
we have the pleasure to basically have lots of conversations within like our peers who are providing infrastructure, but also with the builders to figure out, okay, what's the best setup to serve these different needs.
That's a great point, Paul, on two things. I think that Dia is positioned similar to Ankr to, whatever the next hot scaling solution is that you guys like Ankr is perfectly suited to be able to provide that infrastructure for. But back to your point around, there not being a one size fits all solution and that different developers might need different types of configurations specific to rollups. I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think it depends on the type of company, and I'll just use company as a term because developer can be quite broad. But I mean, think about it. If you're a startup developer building a game, right? Like there are templates that can be built or that are being built right now that can service developers building a game because at the end of the day, a game needs super fast transaction throughput, right? Like they might be able to, and I'm not saying security is not important by any stretch of the means, but there's trade-offs with everything, and a game might need super fast scalability more than anything else, right? So there are pre-built templates that infrastructure providers and specifically RaaS providers like Ankr are able to provide for numerous different games that allow them to spin up a roll-up quick, whether it's a testnet or a mainnet, and go right away. But then there are other types of use cases, whether it's healthcare, supply chain, um, anything that requires a more granular level of detail and is sort of revamping critical industries in the Web 2 world, say more than gaming is, in a way that impacts society, right? They might need more time. They might need to actually, speak to a team, understand, okay, well, like, what does this RPC do? And what does a prover do in an optimistic rollup, or where does the sequencer come into place here? And what do each of these things do? So I think that the use cases are different. I think that fast deployment is very important for a lot of startup developers in Web3 who have been building in this space for a while. But I also think that for the enterprise level use cases, they might need, a more in-depth customized roll-up solution. And at the end of the day, that's what Ankr is able to provide for both. It doesn't matter the use case, doesn't matter the size of the company or the experience of the developers within the company in Web3. We're here to make that building experience as easy as possible for them.
So I love this. I want to stay here with both of you guys, and I have a bit of a question to dive a little bit deeper into this. For the audience listening, just to give some more context on really what we're getting at here, we're referring to the way that Ankr is positioned as a role as a service provider, and also what Paul and Kev are referencing is really the existing development tools and infrastructure that are often accessible to builders when working with a roll-up as a service provider. So as Kev already referenced earlier, these are sort of more easily integrated on the Ankr level for developers to come and build with. They can actually, have go-to-market oracles or RPC and node providers that they can basically select when choosing what to deploy their rollup. And so one of the questions that I definitely wanted to ask you, Kev, is really, when we dive into this and when you evaluate this from your perspective, how do you, look at these different toolings and development and infrastructure providers? How do you evaluate which ones to select as your go-to-market partners for, roll-up developers to select from?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the quality of the project, right? So there are incredible companies like Dia out there, right, that provide an incredible architecture or an incredible solution that we want to partner with. So for instance, I would say you could look at it like each role as a service provider has a different stack, right? So for Ankr stack, you have you'll have the say the top, I like to consider it like a top part, and these are the types of chains that are offering roll-up solutions like Optimism through their super chains, and ZK Stack, ZK Sync through their hyper chains, and then Polygon CDK and Arbitrum Orbit, all of which Ankr is partnered with. But then below that, you will have another layer, which is the data availability layer, right? So when we consider, okay, who do we want to work with? Well, we want to work with the protocols that are driving a lot of value and have a lot of great experience in the space. So for Ankr, we're partnered with Celestia and NearDA, and then of course a developer can obviously utilize Ethereum as the data availability layer. And then below that, of course, you have the interoperability layer, which is very important. And when we consider who we want to choose and who we want to incorporate and partner with for these different layers of the rollup stack, again, it comes down to what type of service are they offering? How are they empowering developers with this specific detail, this specific part of a rollup that's going to make their company, right, or service or application that much better, and that much better to the user. Because at the end of the day, if we can provide that level of building experience with these different partners, that's what's going to empower these developers in Web3 to build an incredible user experience that's actually going to attract everyday users from Web2 and truly utilizing Web3 applications. So when we look into considering, okay, who do we bring into our stack? At the end of the day, it comes down to what value they're providing. And of course, companies like Dia do such an amazing job of providing that level of value to developers, and that's what we consider.
I appreciate that insight. Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, I think this space is just, or rather the roll-up as a service space that is creating so many opportunities for all these different players. Even if teams are not necessarily integrated as like a go-to option, that doesn't mean that the roll-up itself can't select external teams to build and deploy, their toolings or infra on their roll-up specifically. Paul, how do you see this from the Dia side? And you actually already referenced, how we're still actively sort of navigating within this, I guess, new sector here, how everything's going to work and fit together. From the Dia side, do you envision a future where, Dia is really implemented on the core framework level here, or rather on like the rollup level, where rollups can come and select and deploy Dia uniquely, or will it be subjective? Maybe some context here from your perspective, how you see things playing out.
Yeah, love to. So like my my current crystal ball tells me that similar to what Kev was referring to, like I guess currently like this dual approach, being able and being accessible in a very modularized fashion. So a builder can basically pick each and every component, individualize their infrastructure completely to their needs, up to the smallest detail, is really important. And I think this freedom of choice is great, and kind of something very close to our heart and the entire space. At the same time, those templates Kev was referring to, I think, are essential to provide access to people who might be also new to this space and really have uh, an idea which is product first, right? They want to build something with a specific like outcome for the user, and they might be a novice within the Web3 space, and they just want to have something quickly accessible that works. So we believe that we should cater to both of these use cases without like losing focus, and hence it's so important to work together with great partners such as Ankr, where we feel that okay, with Ankr we basically provide jointly and other components a template for a lot of users which can be easily accessible. And yeah, I think this is exactly the differentiating value proposition we want to maintain for these different types of builders. Maybe just answering quickly on also on your question on how do we believe we should be integrated. Obviously, now everything is it's a pretty fresh it's a pretty fresh alignment of these different components, and not everything is just like directly deployed on a new chain. I think we're still figuring out what are the best setups, and I mean, this is kind of like thing with lots of moving parts, right? Like the rollups themselves are changing the code base there. Then we have different infrastructure components which are constantly being updated, and especially for these templates, obviously we need to maintain that they work in sync together. So I believe that over the next months, we'll all jointly work on having these templates being like automatically deployed on new rollups and functioning, no matter what changes within the individual components do happen. And obviously that's kind of like makes certain things a bit less flexible, and it requires lots of coordination. At the same time, I think luckily this will be kind of a prerequisite because we're seeing this tremendous growth in the space. So while it's possible to cater to, I don't know, a whole dozen of individual requests and walk them through the process and support the developers. We're seeing like triple-digit numbers of interests of chains, and with this, automation is really needed. Yeah, so again, it will be a combination. I think we need both. Being very flexible on the modular components, and being able to build out new use cases, and having these individual components and modules provided by all the different participants, having the flexibility of innovate fast in an independent way, but at the same time have these templates Kev was referring to, which can be easily deployed, one-click deployments of a bunch of infrastructure components for the builders to really cater to this massively quickly growing number of builders in the RaaS space.
Thank you, Paul. I think those are some really great insights. And, what really stands out to me is, like you said, like the flexibility that's required to navigate this space, I guess, appropriately, because we see changing demands, new needs evolving, almost daily here. And, you opened up my perspective there as well, in that, and such as Kevin expressed as well, or sorry, Kev, in that when we have this huge growth of rollups, they will have unique needs themselves. So flexibility and customizability is definitely of the essence for the infra providers and for the toolings. So I definitely appreciate that approach, in that things definitely need to be customizable and bespoke in order to cater well to all the different and growing needs within this space. That's definitely a strong takeaway from me. I know we're coming up on a half hour here, and there's so many questions I want to get through. This is a really exciting first kickoff of Rollup Dialogues. Kev, I want to bring it high level again. I know we just got into the weeds a little bit. But one thing for our audience, if you wouldn't mind, Kev, spending a few minutes here, is really, you referenced, we've seen the launch and adoption of both ZK and optimistic rollup architectures. So I want to just take a few minutes to dive into really the background on really what this entails and how you see the difference here. For some more context, anybody in the audience, some of the prominent ZK rollups that we've seen come to life here are ZK Sync, StarkNet, Polygon, ZKVM perhaps, and some of the prominent optimistic rollups that you might be familiar with are Optimism, Arbitrum, Boba. Kev, how would you explain the difference between these various rollup architectures? And interestingly, in your view, is one objectively better than the other, or are there pros and cons to both?
I'm definitely not going to say one's better than the other, since we partner with both. But what I would say is that They do both have their pros, and of course, everyone and every project has their own cons. But from a high level, zk rollups, they use what are known as cryptographic proofs, and those cryptographic proofs validate transactions off chain before posting them to the main chain. From a high level, optimistic rollups they do it in a little bit of a different way. So they assume that every transaction is automatically valid and accurate, and then they only perform, say, what are known as like computation disputes over, say, if that transaction is in fact valid, once it's on chain, and that goes through what is known as a fraud proof. As you'd mentioned, there are a lot of great projects building both. zk Sync, Polygon zk EVM are both great examples. Starknet as well, of zk rollups, and then of course you have Arbitrum and Optimism that are building optimistic rollups. I think that both provide such an incredible service. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to the developer preference. It comes down to what type of solution they feel most comfortable with. And at the end of the day, our coverage, like our physical infrastructure with bare metal servers, are going to service developers on either one of them. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. And of course, we can go into more of the technical details of the differences between the two. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to the developer's preference.
That's perfect. I appreciate that background on both of those. I thought it would be, remiss to dive into a whole spaces of roll-up dialogues here and not really get into the core, differentiate different options that builders have. And thanks for your perspective on that. I think it's a good approach to not say anything is better than anything else in crypto, because as we all know, things change and evolve so fast. And I like that perspective, that it really comes down to the developer needs and catering to the developers. One thing I want to do now is switch to more of like an open discussion between the two of you, just an open dialogue. A few, like, two different questions that I'd really love to gain your perspectives on, referencing sort of like looking into the future, looking forward. So one thing that stands out to me and that I remember vividly is I saw a presentation during ETH Denver that suggested that there will already be 1,000 rollups by the end of 2024. So, that's already over the course of the next 3 quarters. We'll see 1,000 rollups by the end of the year. Kev, Paul, do you guys agree with this? Do you think this is true? Is this, if that's true, is this really where the industry is headed? And I guess I know I'm springing a lot of questions here, but also along the lines of this, if this is the case, does the industry become completely fragmented or increasingly fragmented? Or will there be solutions to make the user experience and the builder experience, across rollups smooth? So again, I asked a bunch of things there, but do you guys really think that there's going to be 1,000 rollups by the end of 2024? And what are the implications for fragmentation that this might have? Maybe Kev, I can switch it to you first if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. I would say ultimately, it. I don't want to say whether or not 1,000 rollups will happen or not. I don't think it's impossible. I think a lot of things depend on economic factors, is what I would say. And obviously, there's a lot of liquidity coming into the market, and with more liquidity in the market means more companies that are willing to spend on infrastructure, more companies willing to utilize RaaS providers to build a rollup, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, it could happen. But like, also, if I look back to I think it was 2021 or 2022, right around that time was when app chains were the hot layer 2 scaling solution, right? Like, people were building Cosmos Zone, or they still are, of course, but Cosmos Zones were very attractive. Polygon had a solution called Supernets, which they sort of transformed into Polygon CDK. Avalanche, of course, has their subnets. Right around that time, those were, the hot layer 2 scaling solutions. Ankr actually pioneered, what was known as app chain infrastructure at that time. But then, towards the end of 2021, early 2022, the market started to slow down a bit. Market kind of tanked and liquidity dried up, and then no one, was building nearly as many app chains as, we originally intended at the time. And the reason why I bring that up is because now we're in a place where the market is very healthy and there's a lot of excitement around this space, not only from an investor perspective, but also from a building perspective. So I don't think that 1,000, rollups is necessarily out of the question, but it's kind of a, like, if that were to come to fruition, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because, like, say we have, like, let's look at the benefits of that, right? Super scalable, very efficient, developers building great applications with amazing infrastructure. But to your point, we'd have sort of fragmented ecosystems. And in that case, we'll have fragmented user experiences, right? Like, users will have to utilize different types of rollups. That could hinder adoption from, like, a consumer perspective, potentially, with the lack of interoperability. But I like to I like to think the glass is always half full. So with every challenge, that just proposes another potential solution. And companies are building, cross rollup communication protocols and layer two to layer two bridges, right? Which, streamlines that interoperability and makes the user experience better for people to transfer data and transactions amongst different chains. So, like, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but in the long term, like, sure, I think 1,000 rollups is possible. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, I would say, liquidity in the market, and then as well as, the more developers that we attract into this space.
Thanks, Kevin. Kev, sorry. I think that's really interesting, comparing and contrasting to the app chain sort of cycle that we saw, and how liquidity in the market sentiment really has an effect on this. Paul, any thoughts or anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I remember this comment from Denver as well, the 1,000 roll-ups at the end of the year. And I mean, this is just like a week or two ago, and I was kind of skeptic. Thought that's quite a large number, but you know what? Like 10 days later, I do feel this is actually quite realistic, and this has I think very much to do something with the ability of all us infrastructure providers pre-configuring and making basically the whole process of deploying a roll-up much easier. So I'm quite, and then I mean, next question is, at what point does a roll-up qualify as a roll-up, right? So I mean, I'm sure we'll also see like a lot of ghost chains being deployed, but nonetheless, I do feel with the ease of deploying these chains, we'll see a lot, and catering to a lot of builders who will, with this easy lift of using this infrastructure, will opt in to build on a roll-up. And it's not only when you break it down to all the different chains, Kev, you were also mentioning being them optimistic or ZK based. I think today Binance, BNB announced, so they're also moving into the space. So I think not only will we see increasing traction on the different ecosystems already present and through pre-configuration, the ability of more chains just being able to deploy because they don't need to speak with each and every chain and RaaS provider, because we'll see more and more productized deployment options, but also the amount of different L1s offering roll-ups will also increase throughout the year. So I think we'll have more than 1,000. So I'm going to bet here on this. At the same time, how does this translate to usability and also connected to this fragmentation? Also, maybe a bit of bold statement. I think UX is, for most part within the space, still so crappy that it doesn't really matter if you're building this like using a roll up or not. So it kind of feels more exhaustive for somebody who is already in the space and need to bridge stuff back and forth. But this actually at such a poor UX level for like the average Joe that I think we can just disregard this complexity within the UX. If you look at something like Farcast or something where you basically pay your gas through Apple Pay, I'm not saying this is like the end goal to have like in-store app store payment for gas fees, but it is a good way to show how UX needs to be to reach like a mass market. And I think we can have both using a complete Web3 based stack and having like a very seamless UX. And I think we can just like kind of abstract away all the UX we're currently using, which obviously becomes even more burdensome with the fragmentation of different chains. And maybe like last comment, speaking of fragmentation, when it comes to liquidity and whatnot. So I mean, we love, and here following on Kev's comment, every problem provides an opportunity. For us, it does provide very much the opportunity because we are very well positioned to differentiate between liquidity on all these different chains and the pricing of assets on all these different chains. So the more fragmentation and complexity and the more metadata you want next to your price sources, the more relevant we become. And we're hoping to mitigate this fragmentation problem provide still a good experience for the builders and reflecting the actual liquidity on these different chains.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I do, appreciate that perspective that you've added, Paul, and that, from the DIA side, actually, fragmentation has been an opportunity for us in being able to take a granular look at the values of assets and basically the status of applications and assets on different chains. One other thing that actually came to my mind while you guys were speaking was something else I took away from ETH Denver was a lot of people were talking in side conversations about AI agents. And it kind of took me a few conversations to wrap my head around this one, but really, I guess the overall implication of this is that there will be agents performing on-chain transactions on behalf of humans, which, you tell an AI agent to go perform something, or even it might even suggest a route of transactions. And then you just have to approve it with one click. And this might actually ultimately help reduce the fragmentation and allow people to get exposure and bridge and, use applications on multiple rollups at once through perhaps even a single click if their AI agent is performing that for them. So again, this just kind of echoes back to the point of flexibility, being able to navigate this growing space and cater to unique needs in real time. In that, let's see, now we have the growth and the advent of AI agents alongside RaaS providers and how these two will, be connected and might actually play a significant role amongst themselves and amongst each other. I unfortunately have to transition into wrapping up here because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Guys, do feel free if you have any comment on that AI thing. If you disagree with me, Paul or Kev or anything, feel free to hop in here. Yeah, I see Kev came off. Would love to hear
No,
it.
I don't disagree at all. I think that there's a lot of avenues where AI and blockchain technology sort of coincide and work very well together. That was a big trend that I also noticed at ETH Denver. And also right now, I mean, there's a lot of great AI projects building in this space. I completely agree. There's a lot that AI can do for the blockchain space and vice versa. So no, I just want to say I completely agree with that.
Awesome. Well, that's a win for me. In that I guess my mindset was on the right side there. Kev's agreeing. I also want to. I forgot to laugh and make a comment on the fact that Paul doubled down on 1,000 rollups by the end of the year. So two good things to end off with here for Rollup Dialogues number 1. I want to say this has really been an exciting episode from my side here, Kev. Thank you and the Ankr team for joining us and sharing your insights into really how you're navigating and seeing this space evolving in real time. I want to give you, the stage one last time, Kev. anybody in the audience who wants to, deep dive into Ankr's products and services, or, become a part of the community, whether they're a builder or a user or just somebody learning, any resources that you would refer to them on really next steps here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for first starting from the developer standpoint, if there's any developers on here curious and interested in building a rollup, of course, feel free to contact me on Twitter or on Telegram. I can drop a handle in here at some point. But we, like I mentioned, we're servicing numerous different architectures, and we utilize both cloud solutions, but also bare metal servers. So our deep hit infrastructure can allow you to build the project that you are dreaming of and build an incredible experience. So you can contact us again on Twitter, on Discord. You can go to Ankr.com as well for any liquid staking solutions as well. But also, it was a pleasure to be here. I'm proud to be the first guest here. Hope to be back on soon. And I know that we have some things in the works with the DIA team. So it's such an incredible project, great company, and would definitely want to do this again soon.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. And, we feel the same way about, how you guys are building and navigating, and would love to have you back on a future episode, maybe let's see, maybe next year we can revisit this and see if there are 1,000 rollups and where everything is. So that sounds great to me. Paul, I want to open it up as well. Any last thoughts or closing statements here, or how to be in touch with DIA?
Yeah, so again, we try to help all builders, no matter if you're working on setting up a rollup, or you're a dApp or an L1. Easiest way to get in touch with us, I think just check out our profile on X. There's a link free menu heading out to our documentation, to our developer Discord, or the Telegram, where you can also find our handles directly. Just reach out. We're here to help, and looking forward to support you with whatever endeavor you're trying to achieve and where we can be of support. And beyond that, Kev, very cool. Thanks for joining in here. Lots of things you were mentioning, which echoed so much on our perspective, also on the broader RaaS space. And it's a true pleasure to be working with you and the Ankr team, which, as you mentioned, speaking about the history of Ankr, is always at the forefront of building and providing the infrastructure for the next big narratives. So that's a real pleasure. Thanks for coming in here. Thanks, Dylan, for modding this. Always fun. And of course, everyone here listening in, thanks for listening what we're building, and looking forward to your feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to echo that as well. Thank you to the audience for tuning in to the first episode of Rollup Dialogues. We'd love to hear your feedback. Hop on over into our Telegram, or comment on this post below, which will be saved and reposted. Let us know if we missed any questions, or what you want to hear on the next episode, who you want to see on the next episode. We have these dialogues behind closed doors, I guess, back and forth with teams, but it's exciting to open these dialogues to the community as well. Crypto, we build these exciting products, but it's nothing without the community and the users, and I think we're all well aware of that. So thanks everybody in the audience for tuning in. Again, Kev, Paul, thank you guys as well, and we'll see you all in the next episode of Rollup Dialogues. And until then, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take care.